Let's take everybody on what's happening with energy prices. They are rising. They are expected to continue to spike as the Strait of Hormuz, a major global supply route, is now closed. Added to that, there is damage to tankers and production facilities along the Persian Gulf. Following days of U.S. and Israeli-led strikes, Iran's Revolutionary Guard says that they will threaten any ships that try to pass through. So what does this mean for the world's oil and gas prices? For a closer look, we're joined by Fen Hampson, co-chair of the expert group on Canada-U.S. relations. Good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Good to be with you.
To start, let's show everybody which countries rely on the Strait of Hormuz for exporting. It is the biggest passageway for Persian Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates and Iran. That's a majority of that heads over to Asia. Can you just set up for everybody, what is the significance of this closure, both for exporters and importers?
So for the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia, which account for roughly a quarter of total global oil and gas production, the disruption right now is it's tightening supply. There's nothing really leaving the Gulf right now. The countries that are most affected, as you noted, are largely in Asia, which is heavily dependent on Gulf production, but also there are going to be knock-on effects on Europe, which gets roughly 20% of its liquefied natural gas from the Gulf. What we're seeing is that insurance companies are not going to insure tankers that go through those straits, also into the Red Sea, by the way. So that is, as we're already seeing, we're getting a bump up in oil prices and a major bump up in the price of liquefied natural gas.
By closing this route and threatening the tankers and therefore, as you say, cutting off the ability to insure them, which countries are going to feel these effects first? And when are we going to feel the impacts here? How does that play out?
Well, when it comes to supply, India, China, Japan, Korea, they get anywhere up to 50% or more of their oil from the Middle East. But the fact of the matter is that when you have that kind of chokehold now on roughly 20% of the world's production, that is going to have an effect on prices everywhere. And even though here in North America, Canada, we're not heavily dependent on Gulf oil, we are going to see a spike in, gasoline, diesel prices, and that is going to filter its way through the entire economy if the conflict continues, right? That's the $64,000 or $65,000 question. If this is a prolonged conflict, then there's going to be real instability in energy markets.
Well, we heard from the president yesterday, he's saying between 4 and 5 weeks. Benjamin Netanyahu saying it's not going to be years, but it could be prolonged. What is your biggest concern then if this drags on?
Well, there are two factors here, Anne-Marie. One is the conflict itself. Sure, the bombing may end, but if we see an implosion and essentially a civil war in Iran and instability, you're not going to see a lot of traffic going through the Gulf. The other, big factor is, Iran has been targeting some of those oil installations in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. If there's extensive damage to those facilities, even though the conflict ends, you're not going to see a lot of production coming out of that region.
Fen, one last question for you, and this is a story that popped up a few times yesterday, and this is a connection to Venezuela. How does the U.S. attack on Venezuela almost 2 months ago, is it connected to this attack on Iran? There's suggestion that this was done by the U.S. with Venezuela first, so they've got energy resources, and they don't hit the shortages that they saw 50 years ago.
Well, I think no question that the so-called success of the Venezuela attack has emboldened Donald Trump. In the optimistic scenario, let's not forget that when it comes to energy prices, Iran has been the big disruptor since the 1979 revolution. And if this ends the way Donald Trump wants it to end, you're going to see surplus capacity in world oil markets, particularly if sanctions are lifted on Iran and Iran production comes back. They're a major potential oil producer. And so prices will come down fairly dramatically. But that's the optimistic scenario. And I'm not holding my breath. That's what's going to happen right now, Anne-Marie.
Ben Hampson, co-chair of the expert group on Canada-U.S. relations. Great to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.